In today's video, we're going to create a new world, a new Earth, one that's filled with love and compassion, where everybody strives to be cool, but we don't push each other down along the way to do it. We raise each other up. We help raise everyone up to their full potentials. Let's create that new Earth today on Studio 2 Magic. I say all of that in a joking way, but wouldn't it be nice? What we're actually making today is a close-up flyby of a computer-generated Earth.
How peaceful it looks.
Flash Gordon! I love that movie.
Gordon's alive!
We are going to be recreating this photo as a 3D scene in After Effects. Everything that we're going to be using is free except for Adobe After Effects. Before we start the tutorial part, I want to show you how you can get some free textures for your Earth and the stars. First, create a new folder somewhere and call it like New Earth or something. This will be the folder that we download the 5 textures into that we're going to need. We will be going to a website called Solar System Scope and clicking the textures link at the bottom, or you can just click the link we provided below. So, I go to the website to get these textures and I scroll down to the Earth section. I can see the 2K and the 8K versions. I want to use the 8K version. Since the camera is going to be flying close to the Earth, I will need all the detail I can get. I'm going to start with the Earth day map, which will be our diffuse or our main image. I hit download on the 8K version and the image opens. I right click on the screen and choose the Save Image As option. I have already created a folder for these textures and called it New Earth, so I select my New Earth folder for it to download into and hit Save. Next, I go back to the Earth textures page. I don't download the Earth night map since I'm not going to show any shadowed Earth. The close-up shot that I'm making will be in full sun. I move over to the Earth clouds and hit download for the 8K file. I again right click the image and select the Save Image As and put it in my New Earth folder. I go back to the Earth textures page again and select the 8K file under the Earth normal map, which is the bump map. This one downloads differently, so this time I just select the Save File box and click OK. I wasn't able to choose where I wanted it to go, so it went to my default download folder. So I look in my main downloads folder and I see it there, so I just drag and drop it into my New Earth folder. Then I go back and download the Earth specular map in the same way. The specular map will be used for our glossiness map. There is one more texture that I want to get from Solar System Scope for this project, and that is the star map. So I scroll on down and I see Sun, Moon, and Stars maps, and I select the stars download and again use the 8K version. This one brings up the image, so I right click and choose Save Image As to put it in the folder. Now, if I look at my New Earth folder, I'll see the 5 textures that I want to use for this project. Now that we have the folder with the textures in it, we can open After Effects and then open a new composition. We are working in a 4K composition, and the first thing we want to do is to create a new solid to be the Earth. I can either go to Layer at the top and choose New and Solid, or right click in the empty space here and choose New and Solid. I'm going to make sure that this solid is the same size as the comp size and then call it Earth. Now I'm going to go to my effects panel and find the VC Orb plugin and drag and drop it into my Earth layer. I open up the Effects tab, and in the VC Orb effect, I set the radius to 2000. Then I'm going to go from 1 view to 2 views, and I click in the view that's not the active camera and change it to right view and zoom it out a little bit. Now I can see as I change the Y position of the orb effect and move the orb upwards. I like a setting of -500 so I can see the bottom of the orb. I switch from 2 views back to 1 view. Now I'm going to create a new camera and make it a 50mm camera. Next, I'm going to create a new light and set it to be a parallel light and set it to 86% on brightness. I'm going to set it to not cast shadows by making sure that the cast shadows box is not selected. I am going to set the color from white to just slightly over to the yellow because the light will act as our sun. After I select OK, I set the views to 2 views and make sure that one of my views is from the right. I can select my light layer and start moving it into position to create a glare on the ocean on the bottom of the planet. Instead of clicking the little arrows on the light, if I just click near the light without clicking an arrow, I can just move the light around freely in the right view. I drag it around the planet away from the camera until I start getting a glare where I'm going to want it to be. The glare isn't quite centered, so I'm going to switch from right view to the front view and drag the light over just a little bit towards the center to make it look all symmetrical. When I have the glare where I want it, I switch from 2 views back to 1 view, and now I can start importing the textures that I'm going to use to create my Earth. I want to bring in all of the textures that I'm going to be using now, so I go to my new Earth folder and I drag them into my layers area. I move them all to the bottom and unclick the eyeball to hide all of the layers. So now I go to my Earth layer and I'm going to move my Earth layer to the top and then open up the Maps drop down. In the diffuse layer, I select my Earth day map and I set the diffuse gamma to 2.25, the diffuse brightness to 2.02, and I leave the diffuse blend at 1. In the glossiness layer, I select my specular map, and now the reflective spot on the planet won't show on the land, only in the water. I set my glossiness gamma to 2.62 and the glossiness brightness to 0.81. I'm not going to use an illumination map because none of my Earth will be in full darkness on the screen. This could be used to set up glowing lights in the nighttime cities. Instead, I jump on down to the bump layer and choose my Earth normal map. Then I check the Use Normal Map box. You can use the diffuse map for the bump map and not select the normal map box, but it won't work as well as when you actually have a bump map or a normal map. I set the bump map intensity to 0.66 and leave bump fall off at 0.8 for now. Okay, I want my planet surface to have a lot of detail since the camera will be so close, and I'm going to do some specific settings that will help with that. So in the UV dropdown, I want to change the UV type from spherical to box. This has less of a stretched look when the camera is close. And I'm going to change the UV repeat for X and Y to 2. Now I can adjust the UV offset X and Y until I find something that I like with some ocean in the middle for the sun to glare off of. I ended up using 1.16 for the X offset and 0.5 for the Y offset. Now I want to move my camera into place, so I switch again from 1 view to 2 views and make sure that my second angle is the right view. I select the camera layer and then I click near the camera, again avoiding the arrows so I can just move the camera around freely and set the camera close to the Earth. I also adjust the camera target a little bit until I get a nice view across the bottom of the horizon of the planet. I switch from 2 views back to 1 view, and next we are going to add some clouds. So I create a new solid and call it Clouds. I make sure that the clouds layer is above my Earth layer and drop the VC orb effect into it. Then I change the radius from 200 to 2000, and then I change the Y position to -500, just like we did for the Earth layer. I set the glossiness down to 0 and the specular down to 0, and then I'm going to set the material color to be just a little gray, just a little less than white. Now I want to add my cloud layer map, but we need to do something to it first. So I need to right click the cloud texture down in the layers that we imported earlier and choose Pre-Compose and select the Leave All Attributes box. Then I double click the pre-composed layer to open it up. I select the layer in the pre-comp and then go to the effects panel and open my keying dropdown. My keying dropdown. I want to choose the extract effect and drop it into my layer. Under the histogram display, I'm going to drag these 2 points to the right and then drag the bottom point all the way back to the left. If you look at the transparency layer, you'll see that the black areas have become transparent. We can adjust the top left point to dial it in a little bit to where a good amount of the white clouds are still visible. I go ahead and click off the transparency view and then drag the tint effect into my cloud layer. We are going to tint the black slightly into the blue range, which is what Andrew Kramer suggested, and he's the guy who created VC Orb, so it seems like a good idea. If you click the preview button off and on, you can see how much blue is being added. After I get a little bit of blue added, I close this composition and go back to my main comp. Trains, and more trains, and non-stop trains. All night, trains. Now, I can hide the cloud texture and select my cloud layer with the orb effect. I open up the Maps drop-down and change the diffuse layer to the cloud's texture. Be careful not to select the cloud layer that has the VC orb in it. Make sure that you're selecting the cloud texture layer. When I get it properly selected, I can see the clouds appear on the surface of the Earth. Next, I change the bump map layer to the same cloud texture layer and set the bump intensity to 0.18. This is not a normal map, so we don't need to click that box this time. Under the UV drop-down, I again want to change my UV type to box and the UV repeat X and Y to 2. I move around the clouds with the offset settings until I find something that I like. I ended up setting the UV offset X to 2.48 and the UV offset Y to 0.57. Now I want to go back up to the material drop-down and set diffusion all the way up to 10. Next, I set illumination to 3.6. Then, under advanced options, I set the edge feather to 0.06. And on edge shrink, I set it to 0.01. This just softens the cloud edges at the horizon line. Now, we're going to create a nice cloud shadow layer to put under the clouds. So we select our cloud layer and duplicate it. I use Ctrl D on the PC to do this. On the lower cloud layer, I rename it to Clouds Shadows. To rename it, you can right-click the layer and choose Rename, or just select the layer and hit Enter. Now I go back to my top clouds layer and change the radius in the orb effect from 2000 to 2004. So the Earth is a little hard to look at right now with that double cloud image, but we're just about to fix that. So we select our clouds shadow layer and close the VC orb effect drop down and drag in our tint effect. I set the white value to black, or maybe just almost black. Then I want to add a little bit of a blur, so I drag in the fast box blur effect and set the blur radius to 1. When I zoom in and play with the settings, you can see what this is doing. Okay, so now it's time to add a little bit of a blue haze to the Earth. So I create a new solid and call it Haze. I move it to the top of everything and I again drop in VC orb. I set the radius to 2000 and the Y position to -500. Under the material drop-down, I set the color to black, the diffuse to 10, the glossiness and specular to 0. Next, I set the illumination color to a lightish blue. Then I set illumination to 0.3 and open the illumination options drop down. I set the Fresnel to 1, Fresnel bias to 3.83, shadow light to 0.41, shadow light contrast to 3.82, shadow light expansion to 0.77, and bump influence to 0.54. Now I set ambient to 0.66 and open the advanced options. I set the edge feather to 0.02. I'm going to show you how you can adjust the black and blue areas so you can set it to your liking. Mostly in the Fresnel bias. Adjusting it will move the colors around, but you might also adjust your illumination and Fresnel until you get something like what I have here. Now I want to go ahead and change this haze layer from normal mode to screen mode, and I can see how it's affecting my Earth, and then I can adjust it a little bit further. The next thing I want to adjust a little bit is the placement of my specular highlight. So I'm going to again switch from one view to 2 views and make sure that I have a view from the right again. I just want to select the light and move it away from the camera a little bit so that I can move the specular a little further down on the Earth. Now I can switch back to one view and make sure it's the camera's view. Okay, I can see an adjustment that I want to make back on the Earth layer. So I select it and go to the effects, and then I go to the maps drop down, and under diffuse, I want to play with a couple of the settings. I do some tweaking with the diffuse gamma and the diffuse brightness, and I settle on a gamma of 3.88 and a diffuse brightness of 1.14. Now, I switch back to my haze layer to do a little more adjusting, and I adjust the illumination and the Fresnel, and I settle on an illumination of 0.59 and a Fresnel of 0.91. But you should set it the way you like it, and that's why I'm showing you some of these adjustments that you can go back and play with. Now I want to add a little glow around the edge of the earth. I suggest you don't overdo this, just a little glow can go a long way. So I select my haze layer and duplicate it and drag it below the earth layer. I go ahead and rename it to Haze Glow. This Haze Glow layer does not need to be a screen layer, so I change it back to normal. Next, I go to the Effects tab, and under Stylize, I drag in the Glow effect. I set the glow threshold to 22, the glow radius to 93, and the glow intensity to 1.6. Then I drag another glow effect in below the one I just made, and I set the glow threshold to 60, the glow radius to 10, and the glow intensity to 0.5. Next, I want to drag in a tint effect and change the map white to a bluish color until it looks good. Now, I want to go back to my earth layer and adjust how sharp the edge is. So I select my earth layer and open up my advanced options drop down and adjust the edge feather to 0.03. I want to adjust the clouds a little bit too in the same way. So I select my clouds layer and I open up the advanced options, but this time I'm going to adjust the edge shrink. So I set it to 0.02. Okay, this is all looking pretty good now, so I'm going to go ahead and add some stars. I have already imported my stars layer, so I just click the box with the eyeball to make the layer visible again. Now, I want to make this into a 3D layer, so I need to click the toggle switched button so I can see the box to set it to a 3D layer. I click the box and the stars disappear. But what I need to do is go into the drop-down menu under the stars layer and open up the materials options. I change the accept lights from on and I set it to off. Now my stars are visible again. Next, I'm going to solo my star layer so I can see all of it. And under the transform properties, I want to push it back in Z space. I run the numbers up and it moves back in Z space, and I end up setting it at 20,000. Then I move the stars to the middle of the screen and I adjust the rotation until it's facing flat towards the camera. Last, I just scale it up and move it around until I like the way it looks. I unsolo the layer, so now I can see everything again. When I look close at the Earth, I see that there's a little bit of a glowing edge around some of the continents, and I want to adjust that a little bit. So I select the Earth layer, and under Maps, in the glossiness layer, I set the glossiness gamma to 10. Now, I want to adjust that specular a little bit more. The three main adjustments that will adjust that specular in the ocean will be your glossiness brightness, your glossiness, and your specular. So I adjust them a little bit and try to get that sun reflection in the ocean to look really good. I finally settled on glossiness at 1, specular at 0.38, and glossiness brightness at 0.65. One final thing I want to do is to create an adjustment layer and take it to the top of all of my layers. I'm going to adjust the overall image a little bit by adding the Lumetri Color effect. I turn the contrast up and the highlights and shadows down. I turn the sharpness up, but then I add a Gaussian blur and set it very low to even those sharp edges back out a little bit. Now I go back to my light and I adjust it to be just a little more yellow and keep making minor adjustments until I get something I like. Okay, let's put a little bit of camera movement in this. After all, it's not a photo, it's a video. So I select my camera layer and then I set the views to 2 views and make sure that one of my views is from the right. I drag my playhead to the beginning of the animation and then I open the transform properties in the camera layer. I set a keyframe for the position and the orientation. Then I go to the last frame of my animation and I click the camera in my right view and I bring it forward around the Earth just a little bit and maybe adjust the camera target slightly too. Even if I don't move the camera very much at all, it still will move hundreds of miles over the Earth. After I finish animating the camera, I can render this out and see a nice close flyby of this new Earth. You can do a lot of variations of this and create a lot of other cool shots, but when you move your camera, you'll need to adjust your textures also, since they are being repeated. And if you move the camera further away at a distance from the Earth, it's not going to look very good. You'll need to adjust the UV repeat on the textures and set it to 1. We do have another video about creating full planet shots instead of close-ups here, in case you want to check that out. But thanks for watching. Please subscribe and click that bell. Don't click it. Just don't even click the bell icon. It's too hard to say. I mean, do click it if you want to see our next upload and you want to see what we're doing. And then you should probably click it to be notified. But anyway, we will see you next time. Thanks.